Welcome to No Instructions. I'm Bob.
And I'm Josh.
And we're back.
Welcome back.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Where have you been?
I have been to Chicago for Star Wars Celebration. And I'm excited to talk about it. And
That's
Star
good.
Wars in general.
Because I'm excited to hear about it.
Okay.
But before you talk about it, so moments before you walked out the door to go to Star Wars Celebration, the teaser trailer for Episode 9 hit.
Yeah.
Why is that funny?
I just know what you're going to do. Go ahead.
I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
Do you want me to tell the story?
Sure, go for it.
Oh, okay. So I came upstairs because I had saw that it hit, and I was going to try to catch you before you left. But you were sitting on the couch with a sad face with like the thumbnail of you two pulled up on your big TV. And your kids were running around all crazy because everybody wants to watch it. And so we're like, all right, well, everybody just finally calm down and sit down because you guys are supposed to leave. And everybody had snacks before you hit the road. And I'm like, okay, let's do this thing. And then your wife was like, don't drink some milk or something.
We don't typically have food in the living room.
And neither do we. And I think this just reiterates that point.
Yeah.
And so your one son sat down in the chair and it was like, all right, let's press play. And he like spilled this whole thing of like yogurt stuff all over his pants.
Like a whole container right in his lap.
Comedic timing he had. And so your wife like scooped him up so he didn't drop it and then like gave him a bath. So like all this time it was just like, okay, we're just going to wait for all of the dust and craziness to finally settle.
So we'll continue to wait. It was funny because it had been out for like 45 minutes. And I knew that, but I wanted to watch it with the kids, and we were trying to, pack and stuff and get ready to go, and we had them all outside playing. And so I was like, all right, we're going to get, like, where we can walk out the door. I'll tell them to come in, we'll watch the trailer, and then get in the car and leave.
Best laid plans, man.
And
it would have worked.
It would have, if it weren't for those darn kids. Yeah.
So I got to see your reaction in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Tell the people at home your reaction to it, Bob.
I loved it. That feeling is so good. And I don't know why. It still gets me. But man, I'm just unbelievably excited about... I think it's just because I don't... Like, every time there's a new trailer for one of those movies, I don't know what's coming. I don't know where they're going to take it. And just seeing, here's a new thing that I didn't know could exist in a world that I really like, and I have a lot of memories around it and stuff. And so when I'm presented with, here's a whole new thing that you weren't expecting, it just makes me so happy.
And I think the most fun, besides that trailer was awesome.
Yeah.
But watching it, watching it with you, as much of a Star Wars enthusiast as people know you to be, and you're a very mild-mannered, very reserved kind of person. Until you get to watch a Star Wars trailer in your living room. And that was really fun. I really wish, and I regret after the fact, that I didn't kind of record it because I wanted to watch it so that other people could see your excitement. And when the Emperor's, that cackle at the very end, oh, that was awesome.
And when I saw that Death Star, man.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh, no, look, oh, what? Because I really did not see that coming. I mean, Abrams said ahead of time that he was going to connect it back to the prequels, which everybody was trying to figure that out. Obviously,
to the prequels?
Yeah, he had said that ahead. Everybody was like, what? How's that going to work? And please don't make it awful because you're trying to connect to the prequels. The Emperor was the connection, I assume.
So good.
And then, man, seeing the Death Star, like, they are really wrapping something up. I think that's part of why it was exciting. I like the new direction. I like that they're moving on with new characters and all that stuff. But to see them intentionally, like, they're taking the story forward, but also back to wrap things up and to really finish something, that's cool. I like that. It's not just like, hey, we've got a new audience now. Let's just only move forward, or let's only fan service the people who've been with us forever. It's both. That's great. Mm-hmm. Smart.
And I think with most things that come to a conclusion, like TV shows, you have to kind of do the callback to the old cast members to kind of make everything come full circle into resolution.
I saw an interesting little interview with Abrams from Celebration, and they were asking him like how he chose what to do with this movie. Like, there were so many possibilities. How do you pick how you want to handle the end of 40 years of movies and stuff? And I hadn't really thought about this, but he said that, the movie itself had to be standalone. It has to work as a movie on its own. You can't assume that somebody has seen 8 movies before watching this one. That's not fair to the viewer.
Yeah.
But you also have to wrap up 8 movies worth of story and actually conclude all of the characters, and at the same time set up future. And I hadn't really thought about like how much stuff he had to figure out how to pull off in the same movie. I mean, not only him. There was another guy that wrote with him and stuff, but it's kind of impressive. So we'll see how it turns out. I think it's going to be awesome. I really liked The Force Awakens. So whatever people think about Abrams' directing style, I really enjoyed it. So I'm definitely looking forward to the new one.
I really like that he's directing this one. I don't know why. Maybe it's the continuity.
Yeah.
Maybe it's someone else's vision, and especially being a Star Wars fan, and I really like what he did with Force Awakens also, and so I don't know how collaborative directors are in a property like that, especially on a trilogy. Because I mean, you could have a vision, you and the writers, and I'm imagining the writing team would kind of be the same, like they would be all Lucasfilm people, but having that directorial, that leadership come by and go, I'm going to carry this thread or this theme or these feelings or that resolution kind of idea throughout the entire trilogy. It's not so disjointed.
And they didn't do that. That's the thing. Like, I think I don't dislike The Last Jedi like some people do, but the one thing that I wish they had done differently was that they had planned out the trilogy before they started making the trilogy. Because I just think that works better. Like, you have a better... And that's what Lucas did. He had the whole story before he started making the movies. Things change as you make movies, but having stuff that they could carry through would be really cool. But since Abrams set up a bunch of stuff, Rian Johnson could kind of pick and choose what he wanted to use and carry on and ignore what he wanted. And then now that Abrams is coming back, he has to kind of like work around the decisions of someone else with the things that he started, which is kind of weird. So I think it would have been cooler if they had planned ahead like that a little bit more. But I mean, also, I don't really know how much they planned ahead. That's just my assumption.
I don't know, I'd be very interested because I remember when The Force Awakens came out, they had like the table read with all the characters and the directors and everybody around that. There was a very iconic picture before it came out of everybody like a big round kind of table. But there's no like, oh, you're not going to direct a second one, so maybe we should bring in a whole host of other directors so that we could have one combined kind of creative coalition.
There's a lot of C's.
I like alliteration.
Combined creative coalition.
Yep.
Of movies.
Of cartoonists.
Cinematographers.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I'm really excited. Celebration was super cool. Oh, by the way, I am working on, if you're not watching, I'm working on an R2-D2 model. Look at this little guy. This is one of the Bandai models, and I bought this at Celebration, and I got a pack of, see if I can show the box without hitting my microphone. It's we're R2-D2 and R5-D4 together in a pack. These Bandai models are awesome, snapped together. And what's interesting about this, I got off on a tangent here, and I don't even remember where I was, but I'm going to go with it. What's really interesting about this little guy is that the details are all correct. So they model these
R2's
after the actual
details?
things. Yeah. So every little piece, now that I've been building the full-size R2, I've been trying to figure out, like, how things are layered and what things are called, because every one of these little doodads has a name and has a function and stuff. And you have to figure out how they're attached. And already, by assembling the legs and the ankles, I've been like, oh, that's the thing I have to do next. It's kind of cool. Like, I'm using the model to figure out how to do the full-size thing.
And that's cool because for reference right now, we've been using my sideshow collectibles.
Yeah.
I forgot the scale, but it's probably about 6 or 7 inches tall. We've been using that as kind of reference whenever we cut out a piece.
Yeah.
We're like, what the heck is it? And so now it's kind of cool that you can build a tinier version that is so detailed that it should theoretically mimic the giant one.
I think it's supposed to. I mean, I think yours and this one have all the same details, but it is kind of cool.
Well, that's good because I don't know how much you paid for that thing, but that Sideshow Collectibles one was about $200.
Ooh.
Yeah.
This was $25 for 2 of these.
The quality of that one, like, irritates me. I broke it the moment that it came out of the package.
That's not good.
It had a lot of stuff that came with it. It had little Jabba's little drink tray little thing broke. Trying to get it out of the packaging, it broke. But I mean, when you have it in your hand, it feels flimsy. And so I mean, it's cool and it's nice, but it's meant to sit on a shelf and not play with.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not what I'm about.
Speaking of that, so at Celebration, the majority of there's a bunch of talks on different stages, and there's different rooms for different, like, not meetups, but there's like topics kind of. Okay. Anyway, but we spend most of the time, both times that we've gone, we're 99% of the time in the big expo hall. And it's just rows of vendors. It's almost all people selling stuff. There's a section with the costuming. So there's like the Rebel Legion and the 501st and the Mando Mercs. And they have like booths, and then they have these big things with like costumes set up. You can walk by and just look at the costumes. There's obviously people walking around in costume everywhere.
But their own costumes, or like costumes from like actual...
Their own costumes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the majority of that room, though, is booths of people selling stuff. And it was really interesting walking through there with the kids because they wanted, we were going to buy them some toys here and there and stuff and look for things that they wanted. But different kids wanted different things for different reasons. And a lot of time, like my daughter just loves figures and dolls. And so she kind of collects different, especially the women of Star Wars, but all sorts of stuff. So she was looking for certain ones that she didn't have, and she had her own birthday money, and so she bought a bunch of stuff on her own. And but then the boys were like, the younger ones just wanted to buy something to play with. My oldest wanted certain animals because he wanted the animals, not because they were Star Wars animals. So he wanted to buy like a dewback, but then he was like, "Can I cut off the handles and the saddle? Because it looks like a dinosaur, so I want a dinosaur." And I'm like, well, let's just buy a dinosaur. Like, right. I want you to play with it, but don't tear it up intentionally. Buy it to destroy it. But then one of my other boys kept wanting to buy things that were in the package. And I'm like, well, are you going to open it and play with it? Because if so, there's one that's already open right there, and it's a quarter of the price, right? If you just want that dude or that ship or whatever, it's right there. They were everywhere, like everything you can imagine, in every state of quality, and so it's just a matter of finding the one that fits, what you want. But he kept picking up like these vintage, like picked up a vintage B-wing, which is like $120 or something. And he's just like, this is a cool ship. Can I get this one? I'm like, well, no, not that I don't want you to have it, and it's played with for sure. But it's real expensive to be played with, Mm-hmm. So that was kind of interesting to kind of talk them through, like, unfortunately talking them out of certain things just because I knew they wanted to play with it, and that particular one was not, you're devaluing it just right out of the gate. But luckily there were so many different vendors and so many different bins of, like, everything here is $5. And that's so you cool. Just go in there and, like, dig through and find some character that still had a face, and so that was fun. And they ended up getting not a ton of stuff, but a few things each. They were all in costume for a little while. The costumes kind of disappeared throughout the day.
What costumes did they?
So my daughter was Leia from A New Hope. So she had the white gown, the buns on, and she got so much attention for it. It was awesome. People were like bowing to her as they would walk by. And some guy walked over and so there were people handing out swag. It's like a big thing where, like, you'll go and you'll make a bunch of pins with some design on it, and then you just walk around and give them to people.
Okay.
And then there were these people that had badges that said like swag something on them, and anytime you saw this yellow thing, you could go up and ask, "Can I have some swag?" And they had backpacks full of stuff, and they would just give it to you. It was like stickers and patches and buttons. And
now, were they sanctioned, or they're just like well-wishers?
I think they were. Well, I think it was a combination of both, but okay. I think this was like an official thing on their badge. But also there were tables, like trading posts, where you could take the stuff that you'd got and walk up to this trading post and lay something down and pick something else up.
Oh, that's cool.
So as the kids got a bunch of buttons throughout the day, if they'd get duplicates, that we'd go over to this table and they'd swap it out for something they didn't have. And anyway, so she was Leia, and at one point this guy walked over and kind of bowed to her and handed her pen and walked off and didn't say anything. And she held it up and she was like, what does this mean? And it said, she'll always be royalty to me. Like that line from Force Awakens. And so I had to remind her where that was from and stuff. But she had, you know, people talking to her the whole time and wanting to take pictures with her. And just everybody's so cool about all of that stuff there. Like everybody was cool with pictures. People would shout across the room telling each other how much they liked each other's costumes or whatever. My youngest had on a Porg costume, which was, he's 6, and it was for like a 4-year-old, 3-year-old. So it was way too small, but he really wanted to wear it. So he was wearing a Chewbacca costume, pajamas, with this Porg costume on top of it. As soon as we walked in, this family ran up and they were like, can we take a picture with the Porg? Like freaking out. And so he was fine with it. So they took pictures, and then they said, just so you know, Porgs are the thing that everybody's trying to find this year.
They're all the rage.
Yeah, that's what people wanted, pictures with Porgs. So you're going to get people wanting pictures all the time. And we got several, not a ton, but and we saw a few other people with Porg costumes on, kids, and so they, you know, got together and took pictures and stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that would be my
really
question to you. Is normally you're a very private person, especially with your kids. Like, was that just a different atmosphere?
Yeah, it's just a big. It's like a super positive. Like everybody's there for the same reason. Everybody just enjoys what they're doing there, and they're all there around a property that they enjoy. And I think it's just a way for people to share something that they enjoy together. So it's not even about like they want a picture with a character. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
It's not like Jim, ooh, I want a picture with Jim. It's like, oh, we have the same costume, or oh, I've always liked that costume, that type of thing. So I think it's pretty cool. We went into it with, I told the kids to think of a character that they really wanted to find. So we had kind of a bingo thing.
A little scavenger hunt?
Yeah,
Oh,
like
cool.
everybody picked a character or two that they wanted a picture with, and then we just kept an eye out for him. And if we saw him, we stopped whatever we were doing, we left the booth, and we went, you know, to ask if we could get a picture. And we got all of them except a flame trooper from Force Awakens, which is like a big, well, we ended up getting it, but we were about to leave, and that was the one we hadn't gotten. And we were walking out, and this dude walks out with this beautiful, super shiny white flame trooper costume. And he had just taken his helmet off, and he was all sweaty. And like the guy, his handler with him was like holding his gun and stuff. And my oldest runs up, and he's like, can I please get a picture? And the guy was like, absolutely. He just put his helmet back on, grabbed his gun, you know, like
that was nice.
Totally down. And everybody was like that. So it was really cool. One thing I thought was really funny, on Saturday, it was 60 degrees. We walked from our hotel to the Field Museum, went to the Field Museum, which we should talk about, and walked around by the lake. It was great. Woke up Sunday morning. It's snowing.
Chicago is
dumping snow.
Man, Chicago.
And it snowed from when we woke up to like 7 o'clock that night. And it wasn't below freezing, so it didn't really stick in places, but it was just snowing all day. The cool thing about it was we got to Celebration, got out of the car, because we got like an Uber. We got out of the car and had to like run down this pathway through the snow to get to the entrance. And we got to the entrance, and there were 2 snow troopers standing outside with a flag.
Awesome.
And the kids were just like, ah, it's snowing, there's a snow trooper. So we took pictures with them in the snow. It was a blast. We had a good time. I mean, kids are kids, so there was a lot of fighting and a lot of arguing and a lot of whining and all that stuff. But ultimately, you know, that's the stuff that fades away. The stuff that doesn't fade away is the joy and the good time that we had and pictures and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So you forget all the
so
bad.
good that it's something that means so much to you that besides like it having an impact on your kids as a parent, like how did you have fun? What were you excited to see?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's cliche to say, but honestly, seeing them excited is really part of the. I mean, like we were saying about sadness last week. You know, like the sadness, seeing them sad makes me really sad. Mm-hmm. Seeing them happy makes me really happy.
Does it make you extra happy? I've noticed that with my kids. Like seeing my kids happy about something makes like not just the situation better. It was like this is what is worth it.
Yeah.
And that, like, when you find moments like those as a parent, especially around something that you hold so dear, like, that's got to be super mega happy.
Yeah, it is.
That's good.
It's great.
Achieving super mega happiness is always really good.
Title. Yeah, I think, well, outside of all that, though, outside of the kids, I'd still, as much as I don't want to collect toys and I don't want that to be a thing that I spend money and time on for the rest of my life, you know, because I know it's just not something I need to do. I've always been a toy collector, and I still love looking at vintage stuff and just being like, I've never seen that up close. And I can move on. It's not going to change my life, but like, cool. I get to see that thing, you know? So seeing prototypes of original Star Wars figures from 1977.
Oh, yeah. That would be
super cool. I don't know why, but seeing stuff in the package that I've never seen is just cool. You know? So I had a good time with that. Seeing the costumes is always great. I got a lot of ideas. Got to walk through the droid builders room.
Oh, the R2 builders room?
Yeah. I missed it in Orlando, so this time we made an effort to get to that. And
Were there any of the people that we have met in other places?
I didn't see any people there. I saw droids from
Well, I guess
some
it is
people.
the droid room, not the people room.
Yeah. I did see some droids that I had seen before. I don't know if I'd seen them up close, but I'd seen them on like Instagram and stuff. But it was big, man. Like the droid room was like I don't even know what the size of the room was, but it took us a good 30 minutes to walk through it.
Wow.
Yeah, because it was kind of a winding path through a big room. Tons of actual R2-D2s, but then tons of custom ones. They had a Gonky, which was a Gonk droid that was painted up and had a Wally head sticking out of it. So it was awesome. They had a bunch of really cool stylized ones that I'd seen before. There's like this kind of teal Art Deco R2 that I've seen pictures of all over the place. And it's beautiful. It's like all shiny and everything. They had a bunch of BB-8s, a couple custom BB-8s. It's funny because a couple of years ago, the idea of a working BB-8 was really hard for anybody to figure out.
Yeah.
And now that it's been solved, there were like 10 or 12 of them in a row in this room, all functioning as far as I could tell. So that's kind of cool. And they had, let's see, a bunch of the bigger like bipedal droids that didn't move, but stuff that I hadn't really seen before. You know, just like on display, not doing anything. There was a big table in the middle of this with a bunch of junk on it, like techno junk sitting around.
Okay.
And there were some Jawa statues on it. And there was one of them that was sitting down, and we were walking past this table, and I looked at that Jawa, and I was like, I bet one of those guys is real. And so I just kind of waited and let my daughter walk past him.
Let her test it out.
That thing jumped, and she got about 6 inches off the ground. It was awesome. And she started, she screamed and then started laughing. It was so good. The people in the Jawa costumes are always, like, playing tricks on people and stuff. But what else did I see that was really cool? I got to see one of my friends, Matt, that I went to college with. He lives in Chicago, and I hadn't seen him in probably close to 20 years. I guess. And he was there that day, so we got to hang out a little bit. That was really awesome. And what else? Lots of cool art. They have like a whole art section that you can walk through. They had the Lego booth
with new Lego stuff.
New Lego stuff that I tried to buy, and the dude would not sell them to me.
Aw.
The Tantive for the Blockade Runner ship. He was pulling them out of the box, and he had a big stack of them, and I was like, I want that. He said, I can't sell it to you. They won't be
and run.
Yeah. I bet I can run faster than you, or at least longer than you. But he said they were going on sale the next day which was the last day, was Monday. It's kind of weird. And I was like, we're not going to be here tomorrow. And he goes, well, you'll have to wait till May 4th. That's when they'll be in Lego stores. Like, what? So, didn't get to that, but I'll get it eventually. So, it was good, man. We had a really good time. The Field Museum, though, I wanted to talk about. Have you ever been to that?
I have not.
So, the Field Museum, natural history, I guess not just natural history museum in Chicago is staggering.
'Really?
It is unbelievable. And I went to it when I was a kid, and I don't remember any of it. So we went mainly because my oldest is really into dinosaurs, and they had Sue, which is the largest, most complete T-Rex ever found.
Really?
Yeah.
Sue?
Sue. It was named after the lady who discovered it, Sue
that was
Alexander or something like that. And it's 95% complete, I think, which is really unheard of for dinosaurs because they can never find that much. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I like that. The Mustang that he's working on.
Yeah, I'm
has
almost done with the Mustang.
suspension.
This thing is awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sue.
Sue. So there's a big dinosaur exhibit. We mainly went to see that, to see the Sue skeleton, which was really, it is kind of terrifying to look at a full-size dinosaur skeleton and just imagine that thing real.
Oh, yeah. We went to the Museum of Natural History in D.C., and they've got tons of skeletons. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, you see a Triceratops in, like, a movie.
Its
Or on, like, Jurassic Park.
Table.
Yeah, and, like, Dr. What's his name is, like, on its belly while it's breathing.
Yeah.
And I remember the one in D.C. has, like, a baby, like a little one, and then a big one. And so you get to see the size comparison. And then you try to think, like, well, it's not even an elephant. Like, if you could take an elephant and a hippo and a rhino and just kind of mush them together and their masses just increase as you mush them together.
Yeah.
Like, and that animal allegedly, like, ate plants. Like, how did you survive? How did it do that?
I think it's interesting. I heard this while I was there. They were talking about how big some of the insects were in prehistoric times. And the oxygen level in the atmosphere was almost double or something what it is today. And so a lot of, at least the insects, could get that big because their bodies had so much oxygen. And then as that percentage dropped, they got smaller and smaller and smaller because their body types just can't sustain. Oh, that was kind of cool. I don't know how that applies to reptiles and stuff, but I had never heard that before. So this place was just insane. When we got there, we went first to the mummies exhibit.
Oh, so it's natural history and history?
Yeah. I don't know like what the actual classification for it is. It's just the Field Museum. But they had a mummies exhibit, which was super gross and pretty cool. I'm not a big fan of like grody things. You know, like some people enjoy like seeing dead bodies and mummy stuff, but I don't really like that. But at the same time, it's really fascinating to see a body from thousands and thousands of years ago. Just the fact that it is at all there is crazy. Look at that. Cool little exhaust. And one of the coolest things about it was that they had a CAT scan, a CT scan machine in the middle of this big room with a mummy laying in it. And then they had these big touch screens that were probably like 50-something inch touch screens. And you could pinch and scroll and zoom.
Pinched a mummy?
The screen to like manipulate the CAT scan of the mummified thing.
Oh, so you can see all the cross sections.
Yeah, you could get cross sections in both directions. You could actually, they had buttons for the clothing, for the skeleton, for the flesh, and you could turn those on and off.
That's cool.
It was crazy. And then there was a giant projection screen above it, so what you were doing, other people behind you could see. And you could like spin the model around and look at it from and it was super high definition, and that was really awesome. And I was trying to explain to the kids like, this is unbelievable. Like you can manipulate something and see inside bones, not the outside of a bone, like the inside of a bone from something that lived thousands and thousands of years ago. That was pretty awesome. But I also noticed that as we moved through, so we saw the Egyptian thing, the mummy thing. We went to a whole, I don't know what they called it, but it was like the progression of human life, about like all the different places humans have lived and how the societies have changed. So it walked through a bunch of South American tribes and how they lived, the bunch of like pottery and stuff, and then up to Pacific Northwest natives. So there was a bunch of, like fur clothing and big giant, not tiki, what's the other word?
Totem?
Totem, statues. Some of them are like 40 feet tall. There's this giant room of these huge statues. But as we moved through time, the number of artifacts they have increases. Right? So, when you're in the mummies, you have like a few mummies and then a few little pieces of things. And then it gets up to early, 1900s when you're talking about these tribes in the Pacific Northwest. And there's just a case of like 50 masks. And then next to it, there's a case of 50 jackets. And then there's 40 of these giant statues. And it was just overwhelming, the amount of stuff. And not to be morbid or sad again, like last week, but walking through all of that stuff, I just got like punched in the gut again about mortality. It's just like, all of this is dead. Every single thing that I see in this entire building is dead. Yeah. Of course, right? Everything dies. I get that. That's not sad. But it's one of those just like, man, we are specks of dust.
This is true.
We will pass, and we won't even be important enough to be in a museum at some point.
But I think that's, if there's some uplift to that, is that there are people that actually care about those things.
Yeah.
I mean, because as a kid, like even out back in your yard, there's little fossils of things. It's like that's the rocks or the dirt. And if we were going to be doing a project outside, I'd probably, take a pick to it and not care. But there are people in the world that want to preserve that and want to show, what it was like back then, because history tends to repeat itself if you look close enough.
Right.
And when you don't have the availability to see what someone did, you can't really learn from it. And so I really commend places like that try to keep that stuff alive. And even though it's like, oh, here's one of 50 masks, like you say, or a lot of museums, it's just some really old thing out of context, just looks like some rock or old thing.
Yeah.
But when you have that ability to stop and kind of understand what it is that they're trying to get across or why that thing is significant. Like we went to the British Museum, and the British museums, besides the British Museum itself, like are really awesome and kind of sad because they tended to take like the coolest parts of any culture that they colonized. So there's a lot of really nice pieces that don't belong to England, but they're on display really nicely. And I remember one thing in particular. There was just this little, it was, I don't even, 4 inch by 4 inch little stone thing that I was happening to see, and it had this like writing from Nineveh, and it was just like little hash marks and little triangles and things that made up this language that is escaping me now. But like that was a tablet that was the Noah's flood like account on this little tablet.
Oh, wow.
And so things that you think of like, oh, that's in the Bible or that's a story or that's a whatever. And like, well, it was a story to someone else thousands of years ago, just as the same as it's a story to us now. And so I think to try to relate or root yourself in an understanding or in a fact or in the idea that it could have been a fact even to people back then is really reassuring as a human being that you're not alone.
Right.
That like people cared about their kids. People had to eat. People had to live. People wanted to prosper, and they had to do it in a different way because of whatever they had at the time. But like those things are examples of how tenacious people were. And it makes me like have that kind of first world problems feelings whenever I go to those museums.
Yeah.
That like, oh, my internet is out or my other whiny problem. And I'm like, these people lived and thrived and prospered and were happy.
Yeah.
I'm imagining, according to the little pictures and the little models in the diorama. Look, they look super happy with like nothing.
Yeah.
Sticks and stuff.
Well, they had these kind of dioramas that you could walk through in some of the South American ones. And so it was like a little hut that you could walk through, and it had the 2 rooms separated, and then kind of a little alcove that stuck off to one side where there was like their pantry. And there was, there was like skins hanging on the walls, and there was like a little fire pit right in the middle of the floor of the main room. And it was, I don't know, maybe twice as big as this ping pong table, the whole thing. And this is a home for like 15 people. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, good grief. But at the same time, like that still happens in parts of the world, a lot of the world.
Absolutely.
And so stuff like that is really grounding, I think, to see. It's cool historically. It's awesome to see, to learn a thing about how people lived, but also to get the context. And I was trying to explain this to the kids. There are people that live like this right now. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good thing, bad thing, but we have to be aware of what we have relative to the fact that people live in this exact same situation.
Exactly.
Thousands of years after it was the only way to live.
And I think that's one of those first world things. You can look at it in a museum and see like, oh man, those people back when, like we've come so far as a civilization. And they're like, well, we've come so far as a society, not as a race of creatures on this planet. So... yes, and it tends to maybe create a level of disassociation because you think it's like, oh, that person wearing like a linen cloth back when, like there's people still wearing those linen cloths, or those people still wearing
nothing.
Or the Super Bowl team that didn't win last year, like those kind of shirts, just because some missionary group like gave people clothes. But like when I was deployed, we had people that were living in a mountain, like the sides of mountains of people that their ancestors had carved out. And so, like, you have that ability to relate because this is the house that your grandfather lived in. So you kind of have that. But, I mean, these people were living in cutouts of a mountain that their ancestors had done.
That's wild.
Yeah. And so the amount of work, it was, as a father, it was really interesting to see. It's like, you want to build a legacy? I'm like, those people didn't even have time to build a legacy. They had to build a room.
That's right. They were, like, trying to stay away from the animals that were going to kill them and stuff.
Well, I mean, in this case, it was like people that wanted to kill them, so they had to seek refuge in these mountains or living in a garbage dump, and it's like, whoa, that's madness.
Yeah.
And by American standards, and I think unfortunate by just about anybody's standards, but I mean, to see stuff like that in a museum, it happens so long ago, is only a testament that, like, it could work anytime. Mm-hmm. Like, if all the internet and all the everything went away, if something terrible happened... Like, well, those people back when, or the people living in the mountain, or that had that museum-style living diorama lifestyle, like, it'll be affected.
Yeah, that's true. They would be just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's really, that kind of got me about the whole thing, and I've thought about this before in a different situation, is the scarcity. Like, history is partially interesting and recorded because it's so scarce at this point. So like when we were talking about going to England and how the people over there like don't even care that their buildings are like 600 years old or whatever, and we're all like, "What's a 600-year-old building?"
Yep.
And we take care of everything that's 100 years old because it's historic. And the way that artifacts are cared for, which is good, this is not a negative thing. It has a level of importance because each one of those artifacts, there's just not many of them. Mm-hmm. We are extremely well documented and like over documented in every form, in every part of our lives. Everything that we have is made in excess, like mass manufactured, and so it's not like this Lego set, super cool. There are, I don't know, probably 100,000 of those in the world.
Yep.
Nobody's going to care about that in 100 years. I mean, certain people will.
But one in the box.
But that's what I mean. Like, the scarcity is gone. And so we won't be remembered because we are not probably, generally, interesting enough to be memorialized as scarce and historic. And that's not like a complaint or anything. It was just one of those things that kind of dawned on me. Like, our world now is so it's like so in touch with the rest of the world that there's nothing we're going to do that no one knows about that will all of a sudden be important in 100 years. Everything is on the table now. Everything is documented. Everything is out front and kind of pointless. So like, whereas the mundane of thousands of years ago is interesting to us because we just don't have a good picture of it. We have a great picture
we're
of
so far
now.
removed. Everything is so cluttered that seems simple or so bizarre that someone could be so unfortunate to have to live that way when, I mean, those are through very privileged goggles to make that kind of assessment.
And we just have such a good picture of current stuff, and that picture is digital. That picture won't go away. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting for like archaeology. Like, what will archaeology be in 500 years? Because the stuff that we look at as having archaeological value at this point will be even further from being able to be found. But we're not creating new archaeology because everything is so like well documented, and
you just got to go to the dump and just dig. Yeah. I mean, well, modern archaeology. Okay, I'm going to loop this back in a geeky way.
Okay.
The ET Atari game.
Yeah.
That was terrible, and so they gathered up all the remaining unsold ET Atari cartridges and threw them in a dump. And a group of really devoted fans figured out where the dump was, took some pictures from the time, and figured out roughly whereabouts in the dump that it was. They hired a crew to go and like prospect down into it and to pull up, that time ago plus this many layers of garbage. It should be roughly here. And it did a lot of amazing archaeological investigation just to reveal and dig up and distribute in this very cult way these Atari game cartridges. And so I think it's where that interest lies, which I think leads to like the Americanism of it. Like, what is that interesting anymore? And are the interesting things physical, tangible things now? To where back when you can go to like an industrial museum, or you could go see like an airplane museum, and you can see the way somebody built something a long time ago. So there is a tangible thing you can go and see, or a manufacturing process that might be interesting, or the architecture that has stood the test of time, and things like this. Like, we get silly comments on all of our home videos from people in Europe. They're like, those American houses are just built with sticks and paper.
Yep.
Like, well, there may be some truth to that, and maybe that's why we're not going to be remembered, because there's nothing that's going to be left to remember us.
True. And I'm not saying that like, oh, boo-hoo, nobody's going to remember us. It's just funny how, there's no scarcity for modern time, modern things.
Or is it, okay, so this car, here we go. This Mustang model that I just made is a 67 Mustang. There are these cars. They exist. Some of them are show quality museum pieces, and some of them are rusted out, gross shells that are in a barn or in a field somewhere. And I think that goes back to your level of involvement, or your level of care, or your level of like laziness, honestly. So, I mean, you look at people in England, like they put you talk about the buildings, right? So there's a dedication. And even Notre Dame in Paris was almost completely burned to the ground the other day. And I read an account from a fire inspector or a fire consultant here in the States that was like these houses of worship and these old religious buildings are pretty much tinder boxes. And if they weren't houses of worship, they would have been condemned a long time ago. And so that is a very factual, and this building as a building by itself is either dangerous or not up to code or is falling apart or whatever. But there is a group of people that place a significant amount of importance on it because it is that building. And so I think if society or the American culture or whatever it happens to be tends to get away from that sentimentality and the love of the thing for what it either represents or something special that it brought to the world, and they just look at it like, oh, it's a rock or it's some dirt, or I would like to get oil on that instead of it being a natural part of the country. And they look at it for its very bland existence. Maybe that's why we're not going to have stuff in the future, is because and living in Europe, there are places like Anthony asked me the other day, like if he was going to go to Europe, where should he go? And I'm like, go to this place, this region in Switzerland, because it's just beautiful. Like the landscape, the mountains, all the stuff. Like when I was there, they take a lot of pride in the mountains and I don't want to say landscape's not the word, but I mean, to preserve the country or the area that it is, maybe it's tourism, maybe it's whatever. But in the United States, we have national parks that we try to preserve what this land looked like so many years ago before people came and built factories and houses and stuff on it. Europe doesn't have a lot of that because it's just so densely populated, and it's been densely populated for thousands of years longer than the U.S. has. Yeah. And so I think that if we can be proud of anything in the States, and, well, hopefully, is that it may not be like the car or a machine or something that ends up in a museum, is that we can appreciate the land and the diversity of the land and what it all has to offer. Because I think we get really spoiled in this country that you can drive, ocean to ocean and pass through deserts and mountains and plains and beaches and things that, other people don't have. Their little dedicated chunk of the world looks or has certain elements that we in the States, you just like, oh, well, that's those people over there. I can go over there if I want to and just go see it. It's still part of me as my national identity. And so, I mean, what I would hope, rather than like, oh, this is some iPhone museum or
an app museum.
Yeah, some other dumb thing that we've made now. I mean, yeah, having a few of those to go like, this is what people cared about more than personal interaction. This little triangle that we can't figure out how to turn on. But you can still go, hopefully, my great-great-grandkids can still go see Yosemite the same way I saw Yosemite.
Right.
Or can experience that. And that's the stuff that I hope endures past the selfishness of a given time period.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to, I mean, as a lobbyist or whoever else, make an argument like, well, we need more room. There's natural resources. There's reasons why we should get rid of this for the future. But those are very short-lived reasons.
Short-sighted.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I think the same way, if you were to take that same group of people and walk through the Fields Museum and go like, we could sell that mummy. Or, I could make that mummy into a coffee table. Or if we burned up that dinosaur, then 4 people's cars could drive 10 miles. Like, that seems totally worth sacrificing it from forever.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. The same thing applies when we're talking about, like, bigger things, but the same thing applies to all the toys that we saw at Star Wars Celebration. It's just funny to think about how we put importance on certain things, and different people care different amounts about those things, but everything kind of gets assigned value somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
And someone who's not a Star Wars fan would walk into that and see literally hundreds and hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars for a small action figure and be like, that's bananas.
Right.
I mean, I think that's bananas. But then other people would easily drop that money because that thing just has a different value to them, even though in and of itself it's the same as a bone. It's the same as a rock. It's the same as a mask that somebody found in a hut in the Pacific Northwest 200 years ago. You know what I mean?
That's a very interesting point to make.
It's all the same.
Because, I mean, the Fields Museum is not the only museum.
No.
I mean, and you can make a resin cast of dinosaur skeletons and things. So, like, to think of most of the skeletons that people would see in their museum that's not the big, massive, huge city museums, like, those are usually casts of a silicone mold made on an actual one. So that the thing you're looking at might not actually be real bone. It could just be plastic painted up.
Yeah,
so
that's more often than not.
Right.
Yeah.
So having the skeleton is extremely rare. So one can make that same argument for like the Jawa toy with the actual furry cape, or the ET cartridge. Like none of these exist anymore because someone destroyed it. And so one could be educationally or academically far more beneficial than the other. But I mean, I guess that's in the eye of the beholder. That rock that had the Noah story on it, like that seemed important to me.
Yeah.
But someone else could honestly not care about that.
Right. And you know what's kind of funny? A few years ago, probably 15 years ago, I had a shrink-wrapped ET Atari cartridge. Shrink-wrapped.
In the box?
In the box.
Ooh.
And I opened it up, threw the box away. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't care about that. Right. I played that game. I know how awful that game is. I don't care. And I don't really think it was worth any money, but it's funny that other people would go to the length of doing all that stuff you talked about to get to essentially the same thing. The same plastic out of the same factory with the same ROM burned onto it.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
And that game was not like the holy grail of games. It was
awful.
thrown away
it was
because it
the
was
worst game ever.
It was purposely put in a landfill.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder if we could go back in the time machine phone booth and go get one of those people from prehistoric times and bring them there. I'm like, tell me about all these spearheads and stuff that are on display in this museum. And if I could communicate with that guy, he'd be like, why do you have these? These all suck.
Yeah.
Like, we threw these away.
We threw these in the dirt because they didn't work.
Exactly. That's why it's not stuck into the brain of some mastodon, is because these are garbage. Why are you guys idolizing these?
That's a good point. Yeah. Anyway, it was a good time, and it was far more... I took it far more internally than I had expected to go to a museum. Oh, you cut yourself.
I just pushed on I was like, why is my hand sore? I'm like, oh, it's because I jabbed a utility knife right into my hand yesterday. And that hurt.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Don't do that.
Thanks, Jocko. He provided a Band-Aid with the maker knife.
That didn't stay on.
It didn't stay on very well. Super glue, boys and girls.
Thanks for nothing, Jocko.
Ow.
All right, well, we got anything else?
I don't think so. We got to go get to work.
We do. We have a lot of work to do.
We have a lot of work to do.
Just so everybody knows, there's a pretty good chance that we will be kind of hit or miss for the next month or so. I'm traveling a lot. We have a huge amount of work to do anyway, but I'm also traveling a lot, so that makes it even worse. So we may miss some weeks. We'll be back. If we miss, just hang in there. Where can people find you?
On Instagram at the PI Workshop, and on Twitter at Josh Makes Stuff.
And you can find us, all of us, at I Like to Make Stuff on all the stuff. Thanks to also for the encouraging comments we got from last week's show.
Absolutely.
That was really nice.
Yeah.
Thanks for not making fun of me for crying about my dog. But thanks for all the kind things.
Yeah, that really, I don't know why it caught me off guard, but I guess it was just reassuring.
Yeah.
That it wasn't some like personal catharsis that I made. Like it was really inspiring to hear that two dudes playing with Legos in a basement can really help people.
Yeah. And it was interesting, too. I got a few messages from people who were actually in the middle of loss. So it was really like pertinent and timely for them. And that's amazing. Like, we couldn't have planned that. So anyway, thanks for the feedback there. And we will see everybody next week. Or
Hopefully.
sometime. Yeah, sometime.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.